Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second debate. Instead of Joel Royal would be raising her hand, Rebecca Hippolyte would be raising her hand for the times, beginning and ending. Presiding over the second debate would be Madam Speaker Ammon.
Good evening, all. I would now like to bring to motion the topic that men make better leaders than women. So we'll have the Huns as the proposition team, and the opposition would be the logical speakers. I would now like to recognize the opening speaker for the proposition, the Honorable Vice Prime Minister Khan, in replace of Prime Minister Ilkan.
Good day, Madam Speaker and fellow House members, opposition, mediators, and listeners. Unfortunately, my colleague, Prime Minister Ilkan, is unwell, so I shall take over for him. Being the first speaker from Team Hun to speak during this debate on men being better leaders than women, I intend to give a brief overview on what to expect from my team members to follow. About the names Huns and not Honey, the Huns were a very powerful warrior tribe from Mongolia during the Middle Ages era. They were led by their most revered leader, Genghis Khan. One of his most famous quotes were, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." As I try to convince you with logic and examples to reinforce the understanding and seek your support, I truly hope to generate sufficient justification for my views. In the following discourse, I would like to explore some points that I contend are valid, able to reinforce and support the concepts that men are indeed better leaders than women. So the definitions of a leader, both written and unwritten, are not gender specific. Therefore, you have to look carefully at the humanistic side of the man or woman and separate specific characteristics such as strength, willpower, devotion, respect history's perspective and reality of what works. Now, I shall direct our attention to a few points, beginning with the mental health of women. Postpartum depression, which annexes itself to bipolar and mental health issues. As women in society endeavor to hold a more leadership and higher managerial portfolios, women must recognize their inabilities to support any meaningful leadership role with all their inherent weaknesses. Postpartum depression, what is this? During the first weeks after giving birth, a woman's body begins to heal and adjust to not being pregnant, giving rise to the mental instability of the female. And the existing question, how can women be a better leader than a man with this level of mental instability? On to my next point. Throughout life, men have been remembered in history as being great leaders and warriors. Many great leaders nowadays are men. The 12 disciples of Christ were men. The best athletes, scientists, scholars, and even chefs are all around the world are men. Men had stood out through time as being strong, dependable, and willing to make the sacrifice needed to create the shifts in time and history. Without these individuals, who knows where we would be today? I do not want to overshadow my fellow speakers, but I do my best to grab your attention and reaffirm our position. Setting the stage for my fellow young leaders to further secure our position, they shall delve into more detail about my points pertaining to the effects of women with postpartum depression and the men in history who have been great leaders. I hope by the end of this debate, we would have convinced the Honorable Chair and this debate would be resolved in our favor. Thank you.
We will now break for an intermission.
Good day. I will now call the House back to order.
We'll resume with the first main speech from Opposition Leader Articulate.
Good day, Madam Speaker, participants, and viewers. We, the opposition, strongly believe that men are not better leaders than women. With my opening statements, I will explain what makes someone a good, effective, and efficient leader. I would like to start off by saying gender should have not been the main factor in whether or not a person can be a great leader. A person's leadership abilities should depend on their individual strengths and personality traits. However, in many cases, women aren't encouraged to take on leadership roles as often as their male counterparts, contributing to an imbalance of who's in power. When defining what a leader is, it is defined as the ability of an individual, group, or organization to lead, influence, or guide other individuals, teams, or entire organizations. According to the Center for Creative Leadership, who are recognized worldwide as the top-ranked premier leadership development organization, some characteristics a great leader has are self-reliance. A great leader is responsible. They are entrusted to lead a team by coordinating with each member to do their task properly. They do this by trusting themselves first on doing the job. They are confident enough to execute their vision and do whatever it takes to materialize them. Observant. A leader must be observant enough to see beyond appearances, actions, and behavior. They are attentive and involved in the activities of their subordinates. They know each member's strengths and weaknesses and utilize them to the team's advantage. Adaptable. A leader must be adaptable to changes to rise above the challenges of attaining their vision. They must be flexible to anything. They understand that life is a fluctuation of ups and downs. A leader must be supportive. A certain quality called empathy is needed to be an effective leader. Being a leader does not always have to be logical. There must be a fine balance between rationality and being sensitive enough to deal with their subordinates. A good leader is also supportive of their members. They can see their members as humans that have needs, emotions, and individual personalities. Lastly, a leader must have good communication skills. They must be able to explain tasks and communicate effectively so that persons understand and are fully aware of what is expected of them. Now, you may argue that men and women both share these characteristics, but are they at the same level? Or has society led us to believe men are better leaders because of human history? Over the centuries, femininity has been stereotyped as dependent, submissive, and conforming, and hence women have been seen as lacking in leadership. The male bias is reflected in the false conception of leadership as mere command or control. Although more women are assuming leadership roles today than before, the notion of a woman as a leader is still foreign to many individuals, male and female alike. Changes in perception are difficult to achieve because the traditional norms of leadership are firmly entrenched. In our society, leaders have customarily been males. In history, leadership opportunities for women tended to be limited to all female organizations, such as sororities, convents, and female institutions of education. This way of thinking has to stop, as women are just, if not more, able to be better leaders. Patsy Parker, a professor at Southwestern Oklahoma State University, stated, fluctuations in women's participation rate have been influenced by the economy's history and society's expectations of females. She also found that during the first half of the 20th century, women were prevented from training for or practicing the professions in the same way as men. Barriers for women included legal restrictions and administrative regulations. This has set women back for generations, and only now women are slowly becoming recognized. Madam Speaker, a question. Has society and gender norms influenced people to believe that men are better leaders because women have historically been the more submissive gender and therefore cannot lead effectively? That is the end of my opening statement. Thank you for listening.
We'll now go back into a short intermission.
I will now call the House to order once again.
We'll now resume for the first rebuttal given by Vice Prime Minister Boyan.
Hello, everyone. I will be doing the first rebuttal for the side that is in support of the idea men make better leaders than women. Now, as I begin, I would like to say those were two very good introductions on both sides. However, I want to bring you all over to my side. And to do that, I will be explaining something as simple as examples. Now, we use examples to help simplify complicated issues. And the examples I have are both historical and factual. So the first example I have is Martin Luther King Jr. He was known for his contributions to the American civil rights movement in the 1960s. The second, Mahatma Gandhi. He was someone who led his country to freedom from British colonial in 1947. The next one is George C. Marshall. He was an American soldier who served as a chief of staff from 1939 to 1945. He built and directed the largest army in history. And the last example I have is Winston Churchill. He was an inspirational statesman, writer, and leader. He led he led Britain to victory in the Second World War, and he served as prime minister twice from 1940 to 1945. Now, what sets these men apart is their successes. So, in the case of Winston Churchill, he was responsible for the first minimum wage system in Britain. In the case of Martin Luther King, he helped establish the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization dedicated to the full equality of African Americans in all aspects of American life. He promoted nonviolent tactics to achieve civil rights and led a number of peaceful protests, such as the famous March on Washington in 1963. In the case of Mahatma Gandhi, he fought with mixed successes against South Africa's system of discrimination. He founded the Natal Indian Congress, and his writings exposed the world the injustice suffered by Indians and others. And lastly, George C. Marshall, he won the Peace Prize for a plan aimed at the economic recovery of Western Europe after World War II. Now that I have explained who my examples are, what they are known for, and a few of their successes, I'm sure that many of you present are a bit unsure why I chose these historic male leaders. And to be honest, the main reason I chose them is because I remember them. I first learned about these great leaders back in primary school, and it was something about their teachings and what they fought for stuck with me for all these years. Now that says something. If it wasn't for these male leaders, who knows how the past would have resulted? Who knows how the future would have ended up? Who knows what would have happened to the men, children, women, countries, races that these people fought for? So, ladies and gentlemen, the reason I would say men make better leaders than women is not only due to the fact that history teaches us something that is useful in today's world, but also if it wasn't for those historic male leaders, today's society would have been completely different. Thank you.
We will again break for an intermission.
I will now call the House to order once again.
We'll now move to the first rebuttal given by Vice Opposition Leader Rational.
Good day, Madam Speaker. Speaking in Singapore in 2019, Mr. Barack Obama stated that women aren't perfect, but they are without a doubt better than men. He stated that most of the problems in the world stem from older generations, mostly men that hold on to positions of power. He reflected on what he thinks a world run by women will look like. He said, "Now, women, I just want you to know you are not perfect, but what I can say pretty indisputably is that you are better than us men. I am absolutely confident that for 2 years, if every nation on earth was run by women, you would see a significant improvement across the board on just about everything." As an exceptional male figure who was elected in 2008 to lead an entire country, certainly he will have knowledge on who would be a more effective leader. Like Mr. Obama, I am also of the opinion that women indeed make better leaders than men. Women can possess more leadership qualities than men, as stated in the opening statement. In arguments like these, we cannot just talk off of opinions, but we should put our data where our mouth is. If we look at the leadership experts Jack Zenger and Joseph Folkman, they evaluated the effectiveness of leaders from some of the most successful organizations in the world, both public and private. They also assessed how strong each leader is in the 16 competencies that their 30 years of research proved to be the most important aspects in the overall performance of a leader. For several years, it shows that women have been rated as more competent on almost every dimension of leadership. The first study carried out shows a leadership effectiveness gap that is in favor of women, and in recent studies, it shows that the gap has almost doubled, indeed pushing the general performance of women higher. As with the opening statement, are you conditioned to believe that men can lead better than women? Well, you argue that men are great leaders, but here are some great women that have led. Indira Gandhi. She was the third Prime Minister of India and was well known for her political intransigence and her centralization of power. Not only did she go to war or lead her country into the nuclear age, but she helped her country to overcome chronic food shortages to attain its goal of food security. Surely we have all heard about Rosa Parks. She was a civil rights leader whose refusal to give up her seat to a white passenger on a segregated bus caused her to make a massive difference for many. Her bravery led to a nationwide effort to end racial segregation. Ms. Parks not only challenged the status quo, but she encouraged others to think creatively. What about Emmeline Pankhurst, a world-famous political activist who led the British suffragette movement in the late 1800s and is credited with helping women gain the right to vote in Britain? Her aim was to free half of the human race, the women, so that they can free the other half. These are all great examples of historical female leaders that excelled because of their vision, passion, determination, and dedication. I strongly believe that any man placed in these situations will not have had such a great impact on their country, and by extension, the world, because great leadership is so much more than command and control. Speaking of command and control, studies have shown that 90% of domestic violence is caused by men within heterosexual relationships. These men possess specific personal traits such as being extremely controlling, being quick to anger, being manipulative, and being physically and verbally abusive. Some of these same men have been given leadership role in their workplace. I am a firm believer that what you practice at home is exactly what you will do outside of the home. With all that being said, do you really believe that these men will make exemplary leaders? Do you believe that these men are fit to take on leadership roles? Or do you believe that the aggression and violence shown at home will without a doubt hamper their leadership qualities? Thank you for listening.
We will now go into intermission.
The House will now come to order once more.
We'll now continue going into second rebuttals and conclusions, starting with the Honorable Member Nokud.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. Generally speaking, it is inconclusive as to who are better leaders, men or women. However, politically speaking, men are better leaders. In society, men prove that they are more industrious than women. Men spend longer periods getting the job done. They work more overtime. They do whatever it takes to get the job done. Men are very outspoken and they stand up for what they believe in. Their judgments are rational and realistic. For example, as mentioned by Honorable Vice Prime Minister Boyan, Martin Luther King Jr. He used his voice, took his stance, and never budged or changed his position. His decisions were rational and steady. He made sure his voice was heard throughout the world. He made history by becoming an activist and Baptist minister who played a key role in American civil rights. His industrious characteristics, sturdiness, and rational decision making are just a few qualities and examples as to why men are better leaders than women. Another reason why men make better leaders than women tend to start their family during their career or after they have established their career. After a woman births a baby, their body triggers a jumble of powerful emotions from excitement and joy to fear and anxiety. This is postpartum depression. This can also lead to bipolar disorder. CDC research shows that about 1 in 8 women experience symptoms of postpartum depression. Postpartum depression goes away with time and depends on the support system at home. However, I have heard of real life experiences where women suffer from postpartum depression for years. Consequently, some women may develop bipolar disorder due to postpartum depression. Bipolar disorder can be triggered by a number of things. Unfortunately, in this instance, postpartum depression will be the leading cause. As a result, this is a major hindrance for a woman being a leader. Decision making may be blurred or irrational. Women tend to not be as stern as men and stand for what they mean. Hence, if postpartum depression may lead to bipolar disorder, their clouded judgments may not be good for business. Hence, men are better leaders than women. I will now pass you on to Honorable Member Khan. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member Nokud. Good evening, Madam Speaker, and everyone present here today. As you have just recently heard, the members of my team, Prime Minister Ilkan, Vice Prime Minister Boyan, and Honorable Member Nokud, have presented detailed points using both logic and examples to support our argument that men are indeed better leaders than women. Prime Minister Ilkan would have opened the argument with detail how women are unfortunately victims of postpartum depression, which hinders their ability to think logically. He also made mention of men being great leaders all throughout time, that there were great leaders throughout history and currently. Vice Prime Minister Boyan then went into detail of some great leaders throughout history, individuals such as Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, George C. Marshall, and Winston Churchill, all who have left their mark in history as being outstanding leaders that changed the course of the world and who will be remembered for years to come. Finally, Honourable Member Nokud supported the points made earlier from Vice Prime Minister Boyan and how rational men have been as great leaders. Another point she supported was that made from Prime Minister Ilkan that postpartum depression hinders women from making rational decisions. She stated how women usually are affected more when a man and a woman create a family. Through pregnancy and birth, a woman can develop postpartum depression, which can eventually lead to bipolar disorder, further showing that women may not be able to handle the stress of being both a leader and a mother. I hope after these points have been brought forward to you that you will indeed support our argument that men are better leaders than women. Thank you for your time, Madam Speaker, and everyone present here today. That is all from the Huns on our view of this topic.
We will now break for our final intermission.
I will now call the House to order.
We will continue moving on to our second rebuttal and conclusion with the Honourable Member Reason.
Madam Speaker, there is a close relationship between domestic violence and aggression in leadership. Human nature is to continue doing the wrong things until it is exposed. This is typical of men who abuse their spouse or family. The command and control syndrome. I totally agree. What you practice at home tends to transfer outside of the home and workplace. Domestic violence and sexual assault walk in the doors of each and every workplace. It robs our women of their dignity and health, and it hides in darkness until it is brought to light. My question, do you think it is all right for your mother, daughter, or sister to work for a leader who is abusive to women? Would you like them to work for a leader who is known to possess the following disgusting traits and abusive tendencies? A male leader with abusive tendencies would criticize you, speak to you in a condescending manner, be easily aggravated, controls your free time and asks about your whereabouts, humiliates you, threatens you or your loved ones, blames you for his violent outbursts. A great leader should not be manipulative, should not undermine your confidence, use blame to control you, micromanage you, use intimidation, take credit for your work, meddle in your personal life, but should always praise and encourage your work. One study of 96 cases of domestic abuse recorded by the police found that men are significantly more likely to be repeat perpetrators and significantly more likely than women to use physical violence, threats, and harassment. This finding was from the Women's Aid, a website that speaks out against domestic violence. These men possess specific personal traits such as being extremely controlling, being quick to anger, being manipulative, and being physically and verbally abusive. Therefore, if a leader, abusive infection of women begins at home, very often it will spread in the workplace towards female employees. If it works at home, then it will work everywhere. Many leaders who are aggressive tend to have seen their career unexpectedly come to an end because they have completely lost the trust, goodwill, and cooperation of their teams. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, is an example of an aggressive, controlling leader. He has even made sexist, degrading comments about women. For example, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump said, "She doesn't have the look, she doesn't have the stamina." I said she doesn't have the stamina, and I don't believe she does have the stamina. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Donald Trump said, "Goofy Elizabeth Warren, one of the least productive US senators, has a nasty mouth." Rosie O'Donnell, Donald Trump said, she's a slob. How does she even get on television? If I were running The View, I'd fire Rosie. I'd look her right in the fat, ugly face of hers and say, "Rosie, you're fired." As a result of his aggressive, commanding, demeaning ways, he was not selected to serve a second term as president. Two statements that you should reflect on are: ask not what a leader can do for you, but rather what a leader can do for all. A leader should not be judged by their gender, but by the content of their character. Now, honorable member, objective to conclude.
To conclude our findings, while society has painted a narrative for men to be a better fit than women in leadership, as they are biologically strong and have led historically, we are not in agreement with this statement. Women can lead, and in fact, they do lead more effectively. As leaders, men may have power, but women are more powerful. History has also proven that men tend to be more unstable than their female counterparts. This can be seen in the type of environment each gender is associated with. While female leaders tend to have a more composed environment, male leaders have an unstable environment. Society has behind the scenes forced men to always lead in every aspect of life, which leads to sexism and manipulation. When men take a leadership role, they gain power and status, which is an actual privilege, while women just get generalizations based on them. It's crucial that we understand this argument so we can stop reinforcing sexism and maybe even begin to remove it from society. We hope you enjoyed our debate and thank you for listening. With that being said, I would leave you all with a quote a wise man once said: "You educate a man, you educate a man. You educate a woman, you educate a generation."
We now bring the motion that men make better leaders than women to an end. And we will break for an assessment.